That's nice. I thought you were from the Daily Trash Mag, whose job was to take me to the cleaners.
Some people have asked, does Bill Bruford hate Robert Fripp? Does Robert Fripp hate Bill Bruford? And I thought, well, that would be fun to talk about, but I don't know if that would be the best use of the time.
We can do lots of that stuff if you like. That's incredibly simple to deal with. Art, life, and money making, that's much harder.
Okay, does Bill
That's
Bruford
really
hate
cool.
Robert Fripp?
No, he does not hate Robert Fripp at all. No, I've learned tons from Robert, and he's been a very generous colleague for many years, so not in the slightest.
When I've heard people even discuss this, I just think I've met both of these guys. I've not worked with them, but obviously like they are gentlemen. They know how to along with people. Being on stage and being in studio, I mean, I read your book, so entirely different experiences, but it is wild to me that there would be, I don't know, just a sense of animosity.
Well, what can I say? We live in that kind of a world. Yeah, well, Robert and I have had our differences, and we're pretty good at talking them out at much too much length, really. And it was very noticeable when we invited two United States musicians to join us, one Adrian Belew and one Tony Levin. And the two Brits, we're far too verbal. That's the problem with us guys. We're too verbal. So Robert and I would try to sort of talk things through quite a lot. And Adrian and Tony would disappear, to the pool table, and an hour or two would pass, and then they'd come back and play the shit out of it anyway. Isn't that funny? It's great.
I asked Tony, since he's in Beat playing this, 1980s King Crimson music,
Yeah.
how is the experience with four Americans? And he said,
I'm starting to think there is a big difference. I don't generally categorize that things that way, but the when occasionally goes into 4/4, once in a great while, there's a kind of grooviness to it that's different than it used to be.
yeah, it seemed to be much more let's go, action oriented, no real
Yeah.
discussion. And, there's sheet music, that's their Bible.
Yeah.
But that's about it. They're just there to perform. So what is it about you Brits?
It must be in the water. I don't know. I have no idea of what it is, other than we're sort of conceptualists, maybe. We like to think about it first and try to figure out where the thing's going before we've even invented it. We're trying to figure out where the thing is going and what's the sort of purpose behind the music. There's a lot of that. Um, I can't really put my finger on it anymore, but the combination of the two was good, I thought. I loved working with Adrian and Tony. It was a wonderful band.
When I first met you, you
Mm.
introduced yourself and said, "You're the make weird music guy." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah, that's me." And I said, I think your response was, "Well, I think weird music is the responsibility of all musicians out there." Something along those lines. I'd love to hear more about what comes to mind when you hear the term weird music, and why would you say such a thing? Or even if I'm misremembering, something along these lines, like what is it the role of the artist to do things perhaps out of the ordinary?
When somebody says weird music, the first thing I think of course, is weird for whom? Listener or performer? That's the first thing I would think. And what does weird mean? It's usually stuff you haven't encountered before, really. And there was so I played plenty of weird music. I think I'm a card-carrying silver club member of your organization in the sense that Robert and Jamie Muir were pretty weird in my little ears. Hadn't heard anything much like that. So I've always rather enjoyed that. It seems to be a place, playing weird music is a place I like to go to if as much as possible because I'm comfortable being uncomfortable. I think. I imagine I'm okay to play with on stage because I can mostly field whatever happens. I don't freeze to death if the cymbal falls over or if the music goes weird or in a direction I didn't expect. And I like that. I think it speaks to an element of confidence I have in my own playing. But more than that, it's a heck of a lot of fun when stuff goes wrong. And we'll probably get onto it. But part of the problem with rock music is the rock music we've had in 20th century was it was too repetitive, too similar, too stuck in its way. And part of the wonderful thing about so-called jazz music. And before we go any further, we should really say these two words, jazz and rock, they gotta stop. I mean, they are so stratospherically unhelpful, both of these words. And as we now in the 21st century, I think we're grown up enough now to sort of drop them in a way because people like me love both and hate both equally. So I forgot where I got to. So stop me when you want me to stop talking.
Well, I would say when I think about what is weird, I've had some time to think about it because I foolishly picked a name at about 1 a.m. makeweirdmusic.com was available in 2014. So I said, okay, sure, let's do that.
Yeah.
And people have said, well, what is weird? And
Yeah.
and the thing that I get is this music isn't weird. It's not weird enough. And I just think weird to me is creative risk. And I love, I'm an entrepreneur, I run my own business. And there's just tons of financial risk and emotional, psychological risk that you take on a day-to-day basis. Am I going to spend $95,000 hiring this person this year? Am I going to spend $300 on this advertisement campaign? But when I think of weird music, and yeah, I do believe you are a card-carrying member, not because there's anything in my mind unpleasant in the way that some people mean the word weird, but the fact that you believe in and constantly take creative risks. And I think King Crimson and, well, Bruford and UK, these bands that you've been in, yes, were monumental in terms of musical creative risk taking. So I'd love to hear about your thoughts on risk taking with music.
And of course, this weird music thing, this is what the audience, I think that's the better ticket buy, is when you see struggling, so you see musicians or people on stage struggling in some, not necessarily struggling, but coping with places they may not have been before. And trying to make things work where it isn't exactly on the plan. This isn't a rehearsed, this isn't the Madonna show. This is a jazz trio at work, let's say. And you're going to see how the ankle bone is connected to the leg bone, which is connected to the hip bone, and how does that work? You're going to see it close up and dangerous. That's running risks. I think it's lovely, and running risks is a whole lot easier. You've got some money in the bank. I was very fortunate as a kid, to be well rewarded for playing some albums. Even by the time I was 22 or so, I mean, I'd left, yes, but I knew there'd probably be some residuals coming my way, and indeed they were. So we should preface this conversation fairly on by saying I'm not typical, really. I'm a fairly unusual player in that whole nightmare about are you going to be able to put bread on the table for your children. Much of that went away. So was I brave leaving? Yes. Well, not really. I mean, I want to go and see some other asses. You can only see four guys in front of you. You get sick of those rear ends. So I wanted to play with somebody who I was a bit dangerous. And of course, Robert Fripp's around the corner and King Crimson was great. So I loved that. So I've had a nose, I think, for heading for weird. Heading for different, anyway, different. I think different's a better word for me, better concept. I want to differentiate myself from others. Why? I don't know, to attract attention. Maybe I wasn't loved enough as a child.
That's a good question, though, because differentiation is what makes the world wonderful. If people weren't different, if cultures weren't different, we even said about Brits and Americans in a band. It's the differences that make these things possible and happen. And I think the words jazz and rock in that sense sort of create these monocultures that are based around aesthetics. Maybe not whose butts are you looking at, from the drum throne, but other aesthetics like, oh, it should have an upright bass, and the snare should sound like this, and the ride cymbal should sound like this, and a piano and sax, and that's jazz. Nothing with the form of the music. And it reminds me of what Alan Holdsworth said to Leonardo Pavkovich, that he hated doing guitar clinics because all anyone wanted to talk about was either hardware or technique. And Alan said, those things are not the music, and no one ever asks me about the music. So in that sense, I just think it's the differences that are important, and differentiation, like why do you want to stand out? What is it about people who enjoy this music and or make it that say, no, the fact that I stand out is why I enjoy it?
I don't know. It's a funny thing. The minute I hear the word, the cymbal should do this or the bass player should do that, I immediately sail in the opposite direction. I have no idea why.
All right, I'm going to challenge you on that. Because
oh God, no.
You were in Yes for how long? You got to the point of burnout, like to the point that you gave up playing drums because of the sameness for so long. The challenge. Well, I'm based on some conversations you and I had in Spain. But you had said you got burnt out, and I'd love to hear more about this. But when you say I run away from it, you came back to large arena shows where you played the same music every night in the same way, repetitively. And so I want to hear, what does Bill Bruford say about that? Because the spirit and the action are sometimes in conflict, which can lead to burnout.
Oh, spirit and action. Well, these are huge subjects. Sometimes you get, you head or you aim for a gig where you get paid way too much for doing very little. Conversely, you spend most of your life running risks, getting paid absolutely nothing for doing everything. And there's a balance is necessary here. And I think guys who want to live a long time learn how to balance that. Occasionally, the tank needs refueling, and somebody says, for 9 months over here or 3 months here, I can pay you well, and you can take that money and run earthworks. You go, okay, I understand that, and I'm a professional guy. I'm quite happy to do things when I can see meaningfulness in it. When I get lost is when it's meaningless to me. I think so. Meaningful and meaningless is two concepts that I understand. And when it's meaningless, which has very rarely been in my case, have we got time for a story? We haven't really. Just a very, very quick story, but
you have all the time in the world. It's up to you.
Most musicians will recognize this one, where you've gone into a studio. It's a studio call. You turn up. It's absolutely the worst circumstances in the world. There's a bus line of other musicians waiting to play on top of your drumming, your golden drumming that you're about to perform. A track is played to you with a click, and it's a really pathetic kind of flat keyboard part, keyboard only. And somehow the drummer is supposed to turn this into what? A living being, something to do with music. And I had a couple, and it's real simple music. That made it even harder. And there's a sort of spotlight. I can see it now. The studio booth was raised up, loads of guys looking down on me here in a kind of spotlight in the whole room, and fairly big room of my own. And I had a shot at it, and it wasn't any good at all. And then it got steadily worse and worse and worse until I, the great Bill Bruford, could barely play a rock beat in 4/4. Now, what's going on here? My brain is not detecting any music in this situation. I can hear no music. I don't know what to do. it is, to me, the definition of meaningless. So the whole process was going to be meaningless. This is not how any music was going to be made. They'd probably get a product out of it. I'm sure I delivered something, but at the end of the day, I left the studio, and that was meaningless. And if you're in that position, you don't want to be there very long, because that will cause burnout. What caused me to burn out was not having a manager, not having enough money I have enough money personally, but not enough money to wash the face of a band, um, to hire a manager who's going to book the airline tickets, make sure the musicians are there, do all the stuff that you do. And it's horrible. Have you ever tried running a band?
No, I just run a business, so I have an analog here, but
Right.
the creative people I hire, we are ghostwriters, so our egos are not allowed to be on display.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's interesting. That's another way of doing things. Yeah. Well,
Hired guns.
yeah. I'm no good at that at all, as the guys in Genesis will tell you. I wasn't very good. I didn't behave very well. Far too many opinions, uncalled for opinions, but they were very.
Okay. Well, let's talk a little about that burnout and your hiatus from the drums.
Yeah.
When did it start? And can you talk us through, was there a day you made a decision? Or was it just kind of like, I stopped going to the gym?
Yeah.
Like, what happened?
I think if I stopped going to the gym around the age of 60, I thought, I've done 40 years of this and I'm very tired. Not tired in the sense I want to go to bed. It's tired in your very being, in your soul, and you start to not enjoy music. Basically, you don't want to hear any music at all, let alone yourself play any. Around 2008, 2009, 2007, a couple of years around there, I'm questioning it, and I've come off the back of a great fun with a Dutch guy, Michael Borschlap, and we've done plenty of dates, improvising just piano and drums. Nothing wrong with it. I didn't have a drum tech. I really was tired with trying to find dates for the band and so forth. Um, and I think 60 is a good time to stop. I like doing things like January the 1st. I'll stop then. But all I want to do is retire from or stop public performance, getting on stages. That was too much. I liked music. I wanted to study music, so I went to a university here in the UK and did a doctorate in musicology, and that was fascinating in and of itself. But what was great about it was that I didn't have to call musicians. I didn't have to write something for the bass player, that kind of thing, which really I think I'd had enough of. I was an academic writer it took me 5 or 6 years to get a degree. I was then an academic writer for another 4 or 5 years. That's usually pro bono work. Mostly academics write stuff for other people, and there's not much in it. You usually get rewarded, as is in the Deresovich book, actually, by the university in terms of preferment in your employment. You get more money and so forth. I was not employed at the university. I was a PhD graduate. So that was fine, but heavy lifting. Academic work is not easygoing. You try writing a couple of chapters for the Cambridge Companion to Percussion, and it's going to make you sweat. So that was okay. And then all this time, I'd had a drum kit just kind of sitting in my study, and I'd walk past it every morning and say hi, you know, and then I walk back past it in the evening, going back into the main house and say goodnight, and in no time did I feel the slightest inkling to play it. And that would be about 9, 10 years, maybe 12 years. And then one day, a whole lot of things how they say the seven things all align for a disaster to happen.
I've only heard threes, so seven's quite generous.
The pilot didn't read the weather forecast. The landing gear didn't work. The thing was iced up. It all happened seven. There's probably seven things that happen all at once for a great, successful, and happy occasion to occur. And there were the drums, and there was this guy, Pete Roth, and there was the rehearsal room down the road, and somebody said, "Why don't you do this?" And another guy said, "We could play together, I'm around," and that kind of stuff. And a whole pack of cards kind of fell together rather than fell apart, sort of fell together. And before I knew it, there I was, trying hard to play again. And that in itself was quite rough.
I was thinking about the roughness until this morning, as I was just watching some videos of you playing with Earthworks, trying to find some later performances closer to the hiatus, the beginning of the hiatus.
Uh-huh.
And then I thought, oh my goodness, what an opportunity to just walk away and come back. And I think about, sometimes I don't get to play guitar for 2 or 3 weeks. Now I'm certainly not I'm not at the level of anyone who, especially you, in terms of performance. I perform at a church. that's
Mhm.
that's my weekly gig, and I play drums 90% of the time. I play drums hundreds of hours per year in front of 800 to 1,500 people a week, and
Wow.
it is its own thing. But again, that's more the ghostwriter. You're just somebody wearing all black in I think you called it the plastic sheet of shame, in this book, during the,
Oh.
yeah, when you,
Behind the sound booth screen.
yes, the screen of shame. So I'm in a
Yeah.
box, and I just think like, oh, it's wonderful to play music, but sometimes we'll go traveling, and then I come back and I'm playing again, and just 6 weeks of not playing drums, I feel like I can't hold it together. But I also think,
Oh, I know.
I stopped with the habit. I dropped this bad habit, or I'm thinking differently. Coming back 12 years later,
I know. Is that weird?
was that magical for you?
Uh, Magical. I'm not sure quite what that means. It was hard work. I think I just started again at the beginning. I'm okay, you know. So you start playing some beats, and that doesn't sound very good, and the two hands and wrists and fingers don't feel good, and it's. And I went straight back really to a couple of pretty serious hours a day, building it up for a good year, I think, before I met these guys I mentioned, Pete Roth and Mike Pratt. Before I met them, I got back onto the practice pads, and then of course I made the mistake of looking at YouTube. Why is that a mistake? Because I tell you, in 2009 there wasn't any YouTube as far as I could make out. And unfortunately now there is YouTube, and everything that's brilliant and fabulous and exquisite about drumming is available to see. What's more, everybody will tell you exactly how it's done. Our drum is generous. We're so generous. And I started looking at this stuff, and I'm saying to myself, well, my goodness me, this is great. This is so exciting. I want to play that, you know, just like a child. I want to play that, and I can't play it. So I'll play, as always, I never could play it. So I'll play something close to it, which will sound a bit more Brufordy. So I don't play anything that anybody else plays exactly the same. None of us can, I guess. But that was one of the biggest shocks, I think, coming back after some 13 years would be, YouTube and the standard of young tennis players, young golf players, young drummers, young guitar players. Fantastic, absolutely exciting. And I wanted to have a slice of it, and find a guy, a guitar player who was around 40 or something. In other words, he's a grown man, Pete, and he knows what's what, and he's made records and he's played gigs and stuff. But he has that lovely thing that people half my age have, which is, a lot more sort of courage and bravado. And people like me know too much. That's the trouble. We know how badly this can go.
Well, you played for 40 years and then took a 12-year break. So there's 52 years right there, and I'm 43, and sometimes I'll go for a run and my hip will hurt, my ankle will hurt. So what, you are, you turned 76, I think, 75, 76.
I have. Yeah, I'm 76. Yeah.
Okay. 76 years old. Let's say you started when you were back at what, 72, 73?
68, I started. Oh, I'm sorry. What?
At age 72 or 73.
Oh, I came back into it around then. Yeah, sure.
You know, did you have to deal with these sort of physical ailments as well? Oh, my wrist doesn't work like that anymore.
No, I don't have those problems. I don't know why. I don't know why my fingers and stuff all work. I don't have arthritis. I don't. No pain. No, not at all. Not at all. The only pain is that, I don't play everything I'd like to play, but I'm getting better and I get around things, and I'm developing a new vocabulary that sounds a whole lot more 21st century than 20th century. And it's not the same guy who played in early Yes some time back. And I think that's the only arrestable and lockable, uppable offense that I might have had, over the years, is to be the same guy doing the same thing. Whites, jean white satin, daddy dum 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 dum. I can't do that. I'm too edgy a guy. So I play quite differently now, actually. We much with much more dynamics, and as you probably have heard, on a very traditional kit, which is nice in and of itself. That's lovely. You might ask why a traditional kit. It's usually to do with logistics and costs, because that's what's provided, that's what's available, certainly overseas. When we were kids, there was no rental business at all worth talking about. So you had to fly your drums or take your drums somewhere, to Germany or to wherever. And now, of course, there's wonderful rental, and usually you can get a Tama set or whatever drum set you want somewhere, and it'll be pretty good. So I operate with that, and it's not really possible to take fancy kit.
Yeah, and that brings something up. You are known for the Bruford snare, the snare sound, and I've been watching some of your Pete Roth trio performances, and your snare sound is much more traditional. And you commented, the Bruford snare sound is something of a myth, in my opinion, which that to me is the most underselling statement I have heard this century. So what on earth are you talking about? The Bruford snare is a myth.
Well, another slight way of looking at it is, and I think we're also talked about as Bill Bruford, still Bill Bruford, after this hype. And he probably is. I'm still looking at him. Looks kind of the same face in the mirror, shaving every morning. Unfortunately, is Bruford still Bruford? It's in the way you hit them. It's in the way you hold the stick and the way you control the stick and the sound that you get out of the drum. I've played hundreds of snare drums. And everybody says, well, it must be the snare drum. Well, it isn't really the snare drum. Don't tell anybody at Tama Drums this. But it's not really in the snare drum. It's in the wrist, and it's the way you touch it and the way you strike it that counts. But more important than that, even, it's where you strike it. And I think when I was young, I used to put the beat in an unusual part of the measure. Often it'd be 5 notes instead of 4 or something like that. And people would recognize, I think, an oddity in the beat from the snare drum and say, "Oh, that sounds kinky. That's weird. That's weird. That's Bill Bruford. It got to be Bill, because everybody else would play 2 and 4 where the beat came down where you would expect it to. Typically with me, and I think we've just sort of edged on this, I prefer the unexpected if possible. I think it wakes people up. Why is the drummer doing that? So I think it had a lot to do with people recognizing my drumming, but because of its idiosyncrasies. rather than the sound of the drum. It's the placement of the beat, in my opinion.
Okay, yes. But even listening,
You're not buying it.
of course I'm not buying it, because as an audio person, I just mixed my own album and got drum tracks from Morgan Ogren. I recorded drums here in my studio. And Pat Mastellato came and played my drum kit when he was rehearsing here in town, and it sounded, just like him. And I have a nice Sonar, steel snare. And having recorded plenty of snares, as soon as I hear your playing, whether with Earthworks or Yes or whatever, the pre-hiatus Bruford had a snare sound. And it's got a ring and a slight rim shot and these kinds of things. And so there's a pop. Yes, we could say, well, he played every 5 beats, but I think the way that you hit it, it had a sound, and that sound was so identifying. It's such an iconic piece of your music, and when we hear Bill Bruford play, that is the sound that often comes to mind. So when I hear you playing with Pete Roth, it is surprising to see a more traditional drum kit, especially after six or seven piece, all flat. Talk us through. You're not hitting the snare the way that you used to, perhaps, but I would not say the Bruford snare sound is a myth, but you are hitting it differently, and you are a different player, and I think it would be cool to hear about that.
That's true. There's more variation in my playing now on fewer instruments. So there is much more dynamic control with the fingers and the rest of it. So sometimes we're very, very quiet. Sometimes we're quite loud, but usually fairly inconsistently. I mean, this stuff's going up and down a lot. It's an improvising group. You would expect that to happen. Now, the last time I kicked out something fairly regular would be like Elephant Talk, King Crimson, where there's, a backbeat. It's going to be 2 and 4. People want to hear a consistency in that. And you might say, oh, well, there's kind of a Bruford sound in that. I can see that. But that idea is now evaporating if you're going to have improvised music. There'll be funny bits on the snare. I might hit the snare in a different way. I'm hitting the snare all the time, very consciously, in ways that I think contribute to the music. It's just not me imposing my sound on anything. It's I've come to generate what I think the music deserves. If it deserves a Bruford backbeat for a while, then it'll get that.
Has your and I don't mean this in sort of a pejorative way, but has your ego changed, as a result of the hiatus? It was Bill Bruford's Earthworks. It was not Earthworks, Bill Bruford's Earthworks. And now it is the Pete Roth trio. And you are, I think, obviously people know you better than Mike or Pete. And you are an anchor that certainly helps sell tickets. However, I feel like you are not bringing the spotlight to yourself in a way that used to be. And when I just heard a 1-hour show from August 20th on YouTube.
Was that San Sebastian? The San Sebastian show's good.
Yeah, and it's actually a Live 60 Jazzaldia.
That's it.
That's it. Okay. Yes, that was a good show. But what occurred to me is this is almost like a jam band.
Well, this is an American expression. In Europe, we don't know what a jam band is. We have it's something to do with fish, and I don't know what it is. Is it? It's not jazz. It's not one chord. It's not blues improvisation, but it's certainly not European style timbral. What is a jam? Never mind. You understand that I don't know what that is.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. But it is a different sort of music than we've ever heard you've been playing.
Yeah, I think that's right. On that show we were talking about, Jazzaldia, there's a couple of minutes where it really goes well, in my opinion. And it's to do something with playing, let's say, a familiar tune. We play Summertime. You know Summertime by Gershwin? Who doesn't know Summertime by Gershwin? So we start off on that, but it's lovely the way that like a camera, you can focus things in and out a bit. And drummers are very important in that procedure. But the harmony can start to go astray, it can start to fall apart and take on a different character. And after a while, you're thinking, are we still in summertime? Have we lost this? And I think the skill in musicians, if it works well, is that it just sort of hangs on to the cliff face with its fingernails as being summertime, and it will find its way back to being summertime, perhaps 2 or 3 times through that particular song. And so fragmenting things and reassembling them is something we're after. I like the idea of doing that a lot, and the pulse might go, it might not. The harmony might go, and usually does. And it's all a collective kind of improvisation. So the idea of a lead guitar player is a bit fuzzy. Sometimes the bass has the melody. Sometimes the bass will take the melody from the lead guitar, and so on. That's what we do. I like that. Is that a jam band?
I would say exploring rabbit holes is iconic part of jam bands, or at least it's part of the definition, because they'll find a riff, they'll find a groove or something, and just explore it for several minutes at a time. And it's not, oh, there's a head, and then there's the solos, and there's a back to the head.
Right.
So in that sense, Mike is playing a lot of electronic, affected bass, almost to the point of sounding like a synthesizer. And Pete plays with sounds as well, but Pete has to carry the whole band, I think, because he's the only rhythm and lead instrument, like a piano served in earthworks. Right now we just have bass, drums, and a guitar, and Pete does a lot of polyphonic, but also sometimes taking the melody.
It's a tough gig, I think. An electric guitar, bass, drums trio is a lot of work for the guitar player, no doubt about it. But he's got 2 good colleagues. Mike has very good ears, so no matter where the harmony goes, he'll make that sound kind of deliberate. Is that logical? Could it have been logical? Was it that? And he can turn things around very well with the bass, which is good. And I'm very interested in dynamics and timbre. So this stick loud, that stick very quiet, maybe unmatched beaters. You know what that is?
No.
Right.
Oh, you mean on a kick drum?
No. On your snare drum. You've got a pen. You're playing with two unmatched things, a stick and a brush. And when you play the usual things with a stick and a brush, or then reverse it, or a beater and a brush, or a beater and a stick and a brush, everything sounds different. Sounds like a new drummer. Very encouraging. I strongly recommend it in your church services that you do.
I do have a variety of tools.
But so I'm very interested in that, and I think we need every bit of musicality that all 3 of us have to pull it off. And sometimes we sound probably like a jazz band. Sometimes we sound a bit like a rock group, and all that's okay.
Yeah. So how do you back to sort of the question of the role of Bill Bruford? Is this all equal? It seems like Pete's probably carrying the load here, so maybe like 40 30 30 or something like that, whereas Bill Bruford, pre-hiatus, carrying a lot of the load for pretty much every act he's in.
Yes, I'm much more comfortable being what's called a sideman, even as a featured artist, because so somehow it's much more relaxing if your name is not at the top of the thing. My name is somewhere near the top, but it's not the top of the thing. It's somebody else's band. I can't tell you how relaxing that is. To any viewers who are kind enough to listen to this, they'll say, "What's he talking about?" Probably. But I don't want to make albums under my own name. I don't want to. I've done a lot, and I've not really come back to do that. I've come back to play gigs on a drum set, and preferably a very small traditional drum set. with very flexible music. And I reckon what we've got going is not too bad, not too shabby for that. It's quite difficult to do. Bear in mind, there's no money in it, so you've got to find guys who got other careers maybe. So not easy to find people who are willing to do this.
Which kind of brings up, I think we've danced around it a little bit. You said in the interview with Vinnie Colaiuta that I don't think I would try to become a musician in today's climate. Like your exact words, I don't think I would try to become a musician. I feel for young people who want to play music. I think I probably wouldn't have become a musician. So I'd love
Well,
to hear more about this.
they sound, when taken out and examined under a microscope like that, they sound like pretty facile comments. Because, of course, we ignore the great thing about young people, which is they don't give a monkeys about that stuff. Young people, and the great ones, and I know lots of young people, I've hung out with lots of 20, 25-year-old people and taught them, and, and they take the world as they find it. So and the trouble with people like me is I know what it used to be like, and you've got to make this long journey over many years. Young guys take it as they find it. Oh, it's this is what it is today, and I think that's lovely. And I was one of those people once, but I have sort of changed now. But I'm quite sure that if the older British or English drummers had been watching me when I was 18, they probably would have said, God, what's this guy doing? But he's sure got a lot of energy. And that's the youthful thing that's so great about playing with younger people. Like Gwyll Simcock, for example. Gwyll is a fantastic musician. Beautiful. So I feel for young people who want to play music. Well, that's partly to do with the ecology of music making now. It's not an easy place to be, as I think we all know. Whereas in my day, it seemed to be unbelievably easy in what's been called, I think, before the post-Beatles sunshine, which was a lovely time. There seemed to be money everywhere. I could play 2 dates in England and live for a week off the proceeds. So, including my rent. See what I mean? It was possible to do. Now, as we know, it's near impossible to do unless you've got a very wealthy parents or something. But perhaps those taken out of context from that Vinnie Colaiuta thing, I think maybe I would change my attitude a bit. Of course, if I were 18 or 19, I'd probably be unstoppable.
That's fair. So what would the 18 or 19-year-old Bill Bruford think of the 76-year-old Bill Bruford, even just from a how he drums standpoint?
I'm sorry, just from the what standpoint?
Well, any standpoint, but even
Yeah.
something as trivial as how he plays.
Well, I think they'd say there's a guy, who's obviously got a lot of experience, which is a great thing. But I think I don't have the first flush of youth on a drum set. I don't have that absolute ferocity of tearing the thing apart. There's a guy over here called, what's his name? Jamie Murray. Fantastic. You come across Jamie Murray? Probably not. There are young people around who are absolutely astonishingly good. But like great footballers, age 17, who they don't know what the problems are going to be. They just get on and have fun. And I think maybe I don't have that anymore, but I'm quite good at steering music with a drum set, which is what I think I like to do. What would I think of myself? I would think probably what a lucky bastard. He's an uninterrupted, 40 albums or something, with the musicians of his choice. And I have said this before, so stop me if you've heard it, it's boring, but it is unusual for any musician to play the music he wants with the people he wants, where he wants, and more or less when he wants, in public, and wait for it, get paid. Now that's kind of unusual, and I think the young Bruford would look at the old Bruford and say, what a lucky git that guy is. But I promise I'll stop when I really get bad. When it really gets bad. Promise, guys, honest.
Well, there's two topics before we wrap up. Composition. You mentioned that you had written some of the Bruford material on piano, and
Yeah.
I haven't really heard you talk about piano at all. Like, so is that your go-to for composition? And then the other topic will be fracture after that. But go for it.
It used to be. I don't, I haven't composed anything really recently, other than lots of drum lines and drum grooves, which I throw into Pete and Mike and let them do what they want with. So I haven't been to a piano. I have one in my room here, my study music room here. But it's terrific for drummers, because all you have to do is play drums on a couple of notes and then change the notes, and pretty soon you've got a riff from heaven. Not difficult at all. So for any young musicians to whom I might be talking, I strongly recommend piano to start with, if you could find such a thing, or keyboards, of course. And you can see the notes. If you're not a skilled musician, you can see the notes, you can move your hands. I seem to remember John Anderson, bless him, a lovely man, but he wouldn't use any of the black notes. I'd say, John, it's just lovely, but we've heard this kind of very sweet diatonic sound a lot, this sort of major scale type thing that you do. Why don't you put some fingers on the black notes as well and see what that sounds like? We were really beginners, but he never did really. So he's always stuck in a fairly well-known kind of harmonic trope that he's in the middle of. But piano's lovely. And then I graduated to really cranky digital keyboard setup and sort of digital workstation, and probably a Roland MC500, which you're too young to know about. All sorts of early MIDI stuff, which was wired together badly. But because I didn't have fast piano technique, I could speed things up and slow them down digitally, and that was, of course, great. But mostly, I figured it out on the piano and studied a fair bit. I mean, I knew my 60 jazz chords and how they worked, and I can hear a major seventh and a major sixth. I'm all right with harmony, but it's drummer level.
When you were writing, even with for Earthworks, was that all piano based, or did you move to computer and click notes into the screen? Like,
no, sadly, I was never any good at computer, as you can tell, because it took us a few minutes to get Zoom wired up at the beginning of this. No, I'm afraid I'm pre-computer, really. I'm an analog sort of guy. I'm struggling in the digital era, I think. So no, I'm pen and pencil, and I still write rhythms down with pen and paper, and then take a photograph of it and send it to Mike and Pete. So we're all born in the age we're born in, and I just missed out on the computer thing, I think, really.
I don't think you missed out, really. It's more of, how does Bill Bruford write music, and I think going to a piano and writing things down on paper, is that largely it?
Yeah, that was largely it until the MC500, where I had some sequences and sequencing that I could play Dave Stewart, or I could play Django Bates in Earthworks. But by then, I also was trying to play melodies with sticks, of course, on my electronic drum set, and I would tend to say I'd spent a lot of time with that, the advanced Simmons SDX, which was a sample-based machine, and I would create some sort of a percussion confection, of various sounds and samples and things, and more or less say to guys I'm working with, I'm going to play this. Why don't you record it and then figure out what you're going to play with it? Because this will be the basis of the composition. And that would be my third of the composition. And then Django and Ian Bellamy and Django Bates would add their stuff on top. Later on, I would just provide rhythms, I thought, to Tim Garland, who's a very good saxophonist and composer. And I would send him an idea in 11/4 or something, and 4 variations on that. and I get a little symphony back about 24 hours later called White Knuckle Wedding, and I think that's quick, you know. Nice. I don't have those kind of composition chops at all. Perhaps I'm just a guy who gets things going. You know, that all I'm doing is trying to get people started, I think, so that we make some music. And the origin of that really was to avoid the acute embarrassment comes when you say to guys, come to my house at 10 o'clock and let's make some music. And you don't have any music for them to make. And which is, I always found a bit embarrassing. So I tried to write something to head that off at the pass.
Interesting. All right. And before we go, I would just love to hear anything you have to say about Fracture, your recollections playing it, when it was brought to you. I didn't find anything as I reviewed your autobiography specifically about Fracture, so anything would be great, because this channel gained a lot of notoriety around Fracture.
Okay. Well, I think Robert was pretty good at verbalizing the sandpit we were going to play on. You know, let's play on this. Let's not maybe do that. Let's not play North American blues music. Let's maybe use a 12 bar, but do it in a different way over here. He'd sort of do that, and then usually at the beginning of an album there would be a song and a half, you know, that would indicate that he'd probably play all the way through on the guitar, and we would sort of understand that and just add our instruments to it. And Fracture was one of those. Starless and Bible Black, I think, was the album in question. And that came wholesale. So it was a sort of finished piece, I think, as much as I recall. And we just learned it and played it, and it seemed right and appropriate to use little percussions like a glockenspiel and a piccolo xylophone. And nice groove at the end, though. I thought you might ask me about this, so I was listening to it the other day. Dum dum da dum dum da dum bum 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 dum da dum da dum da dum. That's a nice thing. It motors along, doesn't it? He didn't write that part. That sort of there was no bass part there. Just the chord movement and the top line. So John and I found things to do underneath what he was doing. And that seemed to go pretty well, I think. I don't recall recording. It was a live recording, maybe. I don't know. It was a live recording taken from some gig, like the Concertgebouw Orchestra. Yeah. Yeah, and the reason for that being that we were always short of music, you know, so we often took live music and took the applause off wherever possible. If we liked the thing, you know, and tried to make it sound like it was studio played, they were paying different royalty rates or something. I don't know, it didn't bother me much, but I got very used to live stuff. And interestingly, as recording studios got more and more expensive, the kind of studios that you could put a group in to play, I saw fewer and fewer studio albums. I was on fewer and fewer studio albums as my career progressed. So the last time I was fully in a studio, I think, was The Sound of Surprise with Earthworks. What year would that have been? 80, I don't know, 94, 95, somewhere like that. But the last time, you know, it was in a wholesale studio, you know, big thing, the T-Boy and tape op and all the usual stuff. But now, of course, everybody records at home, like your good self, which is brilliant. And I wish I'd somehow got that organized myself. I'd like to be able to record at home.
It's never too late.
Never too late. Absolutely, you're quite right.